Hello everyone, myself Sanat Kumar Swai, an assistant professor at Vedang Institute of Technology. This class we will be discussing about attribution theory in perception. The previous class we have discussed about perception, what is the importance of perception in the workplace. Absence of perception leads to chaotic problem in the workplace. So today we'll be discussing about the attribution theory in the perception. And what is the importance of attribution, what are the different types of attributes in the perception attribution theory. We'll be discussing through this in the various slides. We'll be going through few slides and we'll see the importance of attribution. So what do you mean by attribution? What do you mean by attribution, particularly in the organizational behavior, organizational setting? Why attribution theory is given importance, why we need to understand attribution, what is the role which has been played by attribution theory in understanding the perception in organizational setting. So attribution theory, it was developed by an Austrian psychologist, name is Friedrich Hayder. Okay, developed by Friedrich Hayder in the 1950s roughly, and it was further expanded by Bernard Wenner, okay, and Harold Kelly. Okay, so according to them, attribution theory, it focuses on how a particular individual interpret with uh, uh, um, interpret the various kinds of events or various kinds of issues or various kinds of causes they attribute to those kinds of events. So attribution theory is all about the interpretation, how an individual interprets any certain event, any certain issues, any certain causes, and how they attribute to those. So in the context of the organizational behavior, this theory, it explains that how individual perceive the behaviors of other when working in a particular workplace. Okay, so we'll be going through few slides, few attribution theories, and we'll be looking at the um, correlation, the few kinds of examples and correlations pertaining to the Indian context, how that is related to the Indian context, how it is related to the organizations which are based in India, and how what kind of significant role attribution is playing in those particular organizations. We are going to look at it. Okay. So, in attribution theory, there are two factors. One is external factors and one is internal factors. So what is external factor? External factor is something which is beyond our control, like society or environmental factors. An internal factor, it's attributed to internal traits, our attitude, our behavior. Those all can be summarized as an internal factors. Okay. Now, internal versus external attribution. So what do you mean by internal versus external attribution? As we have said, like internal attributions are related to our personality, related to our traits, our behavior. Okay. Whereas external factors, those are like external causes, environment, our society. Okay. So what is the difference? I mean, why there is a comparison between internal versus external attribution? Because see, attribution theory suggests that individuals tend to attribute the behavior of other to other internal or external causes. So the attribution theory, so it suggests that the individual, a particular individual in a particular organizational setting, they attribute to the behavior to either internal causes or that may be external causes. Okay, either of the two. It may be internal or it may be external. Okay. Now, internal attribution relate to personal characteristic or traits such as abilities, personality, or attitudes. As we have already said that it relates to the internal traits like abilities or our personality, our behavior, our attitudes. Okay, whereas external attribution relates to significant situational factors. Okay, at external factors, it is beyond the individual's control, beyond our control, and it is based on the situation. How the situation, based on the situation, the external attribution can change, okay, or external circumstances, okay. In the workplace, employees may attribute to the success or failure of their colleagues to either their personal qualities or the circumstances they face. So, let's say we can put it into an example that in a workplace, in a work setting, organizational setting, when an employee is performing extremely well, his or her success or his or her failure can be attributed to internal factors or that can be attributed to external factors. Okay. Internal factors in the sense what? Their personal qualities. Like an individual has got his better way of understanding, a better way of doing his or her task in a more efficient way. Or external factors in the sense maybe that individual is so, um, any kind of external factors they influence the individual and that hampers his or her way of doing work. So it depends in the workplace that the internal factors or external factors play a very important role, and that is what the colleagues or the co-fellow they attribute, and they the success or the failure of their colleague to internal attribution or external attribution. Okay. The next is stable versus unstable attribution. So what do you mean by stable attribution or unstable attribution? See, few attributions or few factors we can say that those are very stable, okay, and those are permanent and that is not going to change, okay. Whereas some attributions are unstable, or that we can say that those are temporary and that are subject to change, that is going to go away in the due course of time. So what are the stable attribution? The stable attribution in the sense, for example, if we say some sort of policy, those can be termed as an external attribution, okay, external factor we can say, okay. An institute's policy, it's not going to change, rather an employee has to adapt to those kind of policies. So that can be termed as an stable attribution. Unstable attribution in the sense, if something happens within the workplace, okay, let's say there is a visit by the higher authority to a particular college. Let's say the higher education, the officials of the higher education, they're going to visit the college or a university for any kind of survey or any kind of um, um, official visit. On an official visit we can say, then that is going to be that is going to create ripples inside the workplace, and consequently the employees, they are going to face the consequences of the ripples. So that can be termed as an unstable attribution, that is going to affect the work, that's going to affect the quality of work of those individuals. But that can be termed as an unstable attribution. It's not a stable attribution, because that is going to go away, that's a temporary situation, okay, and that is subject to change. So that is the stable versus unstable attribution. Next is controllable and uncontrollable attribution. Similarly, some attributions are controllable. Controllable means it is within the control of an individual, whereas few attributes are beyond the control of an individual or an employee. Okay, so how the employee or a individual perceive. Okay, so controllable attributes refer to causes that are individual perceive as under their control, while uncontrollable attributes refer to causes perceived by beyond their control. So what is the example of a controllable attributes? See how you perceive in a workplace. Okay, what is the behavior to any kind of change? Okay, how you perceive the behavior of your co-worker or your colleague, that's something beyond under your control. I mean, you need to control your attributes. Whereas what the other people feel of you, okay, what are the external factors which is going to affect your workplace or your the way you work, that is beyond your control, and there is nothing which you can do. So in that case, I mean, the uncontrollable attribution can also be, um, uh, you can perceive it in a positive and a negative. Okay, so these are the difference between the controllable attributes and the uncontrollable attributes. In this diagram, you can understand. So this is the individual behavior. Okay, and there are three levels. You see, one is the observation level. Okay, the second one is the interpretation level, and the third one is the attribution level. Okay. So from the observation level to the interpretation level, there are three factors. One is distinctiveness factor, one is consensus factor, and the third one is consistency factor. Okay. And similarly, from the interpretation level to the attribution level, those are being affected through, whether through external factors or through internal factors. Similarly, the distinctiveness is also affected by external factor and internal factor. Consensus is also affected by external or internal, and subsequently consistency is also affected by external factors or by internal factors. Okay. Now, integral component of attribution theory. So what are the integral components? So what are the important components? Okay, so there are various components. We will be going through few components. The first one is observation. Okay, what do you mean by observation? To observe, right? The way we observe, the way we see things, and the way we perceive it can be termed as an observation. Okay, now if we talk about the Indian scenario or the organizations, particularly in the Indian context, so what happens is that the observations of behaviors are influenced by many kinds of factors. For example, cultural norms, the way we look at uh, an organizational setting can be different and can be perceived through our cultural norms. Okay, that has been affected by our cultural norms. Second is hierarchical structure. Hierarchical structures mean stages, like a manager, a senior manager, head of the department, okay, general manager, okay. So that is a hierarchical structure within an organization. So how we are going to view those structure is also our observation. And the next is social dynamics. Okay, so what are the social dynamics? The how an organizational structure works, how our social dynamics works within an organization. That also is a part of the observational process. Okay. So what happens is that individuals tend to observe and interpret behavior based on their cultural upbringing and organizational experiences. So the way an individual in any kind of work setting, he or she is going to observe, how he's going to observe or interpret based on the cultural upbringing, the way he or she is has been. For example, I'll give you an example. uh, uh, a Hindu, okay, particularly a Hindu employee, uh, if he or she has been put um, to work at KFC, okay, particularly in the in abroad, let's say, not India, but some other countries. So you see, they have a different kinds of food habits, okay, and that is going to definitely that's going to affect the an employee who is a Hindu practitioner. Okay. Why is it so? Because um, they consume various kinds of meat product, okay, that can affect psychologically and emotionally to a person who is following the Hindu religion. Similarly, for the other religions as well, they may face different kinds of issues while working for those kinds of organizations. Their cultural upbringing differs. Okay, our cultural upbringing it differs. Okay, and next is organizational experience. So what is our organizational experience? What kind of experiences we are going through in those particular organization or those particular institution, that is also going to interpret our behavior, the way we tend to behave and observe things inside an organization. So these are the few factors which are related to observation, and observation is a part of integral part of attribution theory. Okay, next, so we'll be going through an example. Okay, if we talk about an example, particularly in the Indian context, what happens is that, let's say suppose there's a team meeting. Okay, there is a meeting going on where the manager speaks first and sets the agenda. So there's a manager and then he or she sets the agenda. Then what happens is that then the junior team member provides input. There in an Indian meeting, what happens is, in a Indian team meeting, what happens is that there's a manager who's going to preside over that meeting, and there are other uh, junior employees, senior employees, who are going to give their inputs. Okay, they're going to give their say in that meetings. Okay, so what happens is that, particularly in the Indian context, in the Indian culture, what happens is that there's a respect for the authority, and hierarchy has been is is a very important or a common thing in India. Okay, in those kinds of meeting. Okay, so what happens is that employees might attribute to the manager's behavior. So what is the manager's behavior in those kinds of meeting? Whether the manager is behaving as per the position of the his or her position, or and the cultural expectations, and the cultural expectation are difference. Okay, so that attributes very importantly in an observation. That can be the during the meeting, the senior employees or the junior employees, okay, they observe keenly to the manager's behavior, whether that is in alignment with his authority, that is whether that is in alignment with his hierarchical position. Okay, and what kind of cultural expectations are there from the employees. Okay, conversely, if a meeting is conducted in a more egalitarian manner, okay, if that is in a more egalitarian manner, so what happens is that all the members in the first instance, what happens that if that is in hierarchical, okay, if the structure is being followed in the organization, so what happens that there is more of the managers who is going to put forward his or her um, um, the authority in that meeting. So that we can say that can be a authoritative type of meeting. But in case of in an egalitarian type of meeting, where you see all the employees, all the staffs who are attending those meetings, they have an equal contribution. Okay, everybody has an equal share to say. So what happens is that attributes to a flatter organizational structure. Okay, that attributes to a flatter type of organizational structure and to a particular specific leadership style. Okay, so this relates to the observational attribute. Okay, next, distinctiveness. What do you mean by distinctiveness? Distinctiveness in attribution theory is that how a person behavior varies from various kinds of situation. Like, it's not stable. Okay, distinctiveness means how a person behavior varies across different situations. For a particular situation, an individual behaves in a particular way. For other kinds of behavior situation, that same individual behaves in a different way. Okay, so if we look at India, distinctiveness can be observed in how individuals adapt to their behavior based on cultural context, job role, or organizational hierarchies. So similar, it is more or less similar with the observational way, the way we have discussed in the observation, that in India particularly, the individual, they adapt to the to their behavior based on various kinds of cultural context, their job role, what is their job role, and how their organizational hierarchies are being played, their organizational structure, hierarchical structure. Okay, so these all plays an important role in the distinctiveness of an individual behavior. Okay, now for example, we'll be taking an example. So here let us imagine that a lady, an employee whose name is Asha, let's say for example, and who is very reserved kind of an employee. Okay, she doesn't, though she attends various meetings. Okay, but she keeps to herself and is a bit reserved. You can say an introvert type of person. Okay, so what happens is that she doesn't lead the role, and and she is like very assertive to herself. Okay, but what happens that in case of a cross functional group, if there is a cross functional group in any kind of meeting, okay, or any kind of group discussion, what happens, she becomes very much assertive, and sometimes she leads the takes the lead. Okay, so here what we can say that the observers might attribute Asha's behavior to distinctiveness of the situation. So Asha normally is a reserved person. Asha normally is an introvert person. But during the cross-functional types of meeting, okay, she becomes more assertive, and she takes the lead. Okay, so here the observers, they can attribute that Asha is a distinctive type of behavior. Asha is showing a distinctive behavior relating to the situation, because she feels more comfortable and empowered to express herself in a collaborative setting where she interacts with the colleagues from different departments. So sometimes what happens is that she feel more comfortable, okay, in a collaborative type kind of settings. Okay, if she's been put at a collaborative type of setting in any meeting, okay, or a group discussion, she feel very comfortable, and she feels empowered. She feels empowered to express herself, particularly when there are colleagues from different kinds of departments. So this is an example of an what? An example of a Indian setting. If we are talking about the Indian setting, then distinctiveness, how a person distinctiveness plays an important role in his or her behavior, particularly in the Indian setting. Consensus. Now, what do you mean by consensus? Consensus is in the attributional theory pertains to whether others in the same situation would behave similarly. For example, there are few employees or few individuals in an organization or in a workplace. Okay, so consensus pertains to whether if a similar situation is been given to all the individuals, whether they are going to behave in the same way or they're going to behave in a different way. Okay, so in Indian workplace, consensus is influenced by cultural norms. Again, the same thing. Okay, cultural norms, organizational practice, and social expectation. You see, in any kind of organization, okay, let's say XYZ organization in India, if you see, there are different kinds of employees working in that organization, and pertaining to their cultural norms. Okay, and organizational practices, what the organization is practicing, and their expectations, their social expectation, they behave, or they tend to behave in that particular way. So it is not the same. Okay, definitely it's not going to be the same. Okay, so we'll be seeing in an example, and we'll try to correlate. Okay, so what happens is that um, in case of an Indian organizations, okay, the staff, particularly after their work or after their shift, they tend to attend various kinds of social events. Okay, like team dinner or any kinds of festivals. Okay, um, cultural festivals whatsoever. So what happens is that the observers might attribute this behavior to a consensus within the organizational culture that values camaraderie and build relationship beyond the workplace. So in this case, what happens is that in this consensus, what happens is that there is a feeling of oneness. There's a feeling of camaraderie and building relationship beyond the work. Okay. So, particularly in the Indian settings. Okay. However, if the participation is such, event is minimal, observer might attribute to the individual's preference or the absence of a consensus regarding the importance of socializing outside of work. See, socializing is a very important part in today's organizational settings. You see, because most of the MNCs are also preferring and they know the importance of socializing. Okay, though in a controlled way within the workplace. So, if an employee fails to observe those kinds of social gathering or those kinds of social um, um, socializing events, so in that case what happens, that is an individual preference, okay, to um, uh, regarding the importance, absence of consensus and absence of consensus among of that particular individual, and not regarding about the importance of the socializing. Okay, so it depends. Okay, depends from individual to individual or employees to employee. But in case of a consensus attribute, uh, depends on the cultural setting or depends on the organizational setting, that whether there's a socializing part in the workplace. Okay, consistency. Now, whether a person's behavior is consistent over the time or not, that consistency attributes means that whether an individual or an employee's behavior is going to be consistent, is going to be constant. So, if we look at the Indian organizations, consistency can be influenced by various kinds of factors such as your personal value, your organizational norms, what is the job responsibility. Apart from this, these also there are a lot of other factors which can be attributed, you can say, because most of the you see these days, if we look at the IT sector, okay, IT uh, multinational organizations, particularly in the IT sector, you see that most of the employees these days, they are switching. They don't want to stay in a particular organization, in a single organization. They want to switch over. There are multiple ways. Okay, there are multiple ways, and there are many factors which is going to attribute to the to not being consistent. But at least I believe that at least an employee should work in any organization for at least 2 or 3 years. That is going to put a significant mark on his or her CV. But these days, most of the employees, they are switching over in maybe in couple of months, even if they are getting a hike at their pay, or if their job responsibility doesn't suit to their field of domain or their field of interest. So consistency is also one of the part or one of the attributes in divisional theory. Okay. If you are going to take an example of a manager in any organization, so what happens is that consistency. So let's say any manager of in an organization, what happens is that he or she provides feedback, okay, to his or her team member after any kind of project. So there's a project review and he or she gives a constructive feedback. So what happens is that if we are going to observe, the observers, they attribute this kind of behavior. Which kind of behavior? The manager's behavior to commitment, to a commitment to employees development and a consistent leadership style. Okay, the manager is showing his or her employee development and uh, consistent leadership style over here. Okay, so however, if the manager feedback fluctuates significantly from one review to another, then see, if there is a project review and in that the manager, he or she may give a positive remarks to his or her employees. Okay, In another instance, the manager, he or she may not give a positive remarks, that may fluctuate. So that can be attributed to the situational factor. Okay, or situational factors can also be projected as a like complexity of the project or external pressure affecting the manager's decision. Okay, so it depends, it varies from the manager's consistency. In conclusion, now we have seen all the slides. Okay, these are the you see distinctiveness, consensus, consistency. These are the interpretation levels. Okay, attribution levels, it can be external or it can be internal. Okay, so with this we have gone through all the slides. So in concluding, we'll see that understanding attribution theory in the Indian organizational context, why is it important? Why is it important? Because it helps the the authority to understand why and how the individual perceives the behavior and what are the outcomes of those behavior. Okay, and it also aids in understanding and managing the interpersonal relationship. If let's say there is any kind of conflict among the within the workplace, so it is helpful in resolving the various kinds of conflict, if any. Okay, and also to design the various kinds of effective organizational policies for any kind of manager. Okay, and also various kinds of interventions doing in those policies. Okay. So understanding these dynamics can help organizations foster a more positive work environment, improve communication, and enhance performance management processes. Okay, so if we are going to understand these kind of dynamics, then the organization can foster a more positive attributes, okay, positive work environment, okay, and enhance the performance management processes within an organization. Okay, so understanding the attribution theory is extremely important in these days pertaining to any kind of organization. Okay, okay, thank you very much. And if you have any doubt, please jot down those doubts in the comment section. I will be more than happy to clear off your doubt. Okay. Thank you very much.